Hi, I'm Charles Alexander. This is Page Open, a show on the South Bridge Street Live network. And this show is about poetry and books. And so far we've done two programs, one on the British Romantic poet and artist William Blake, and one on chapbooks, small books by poets. Today I want to get a little more toward my own work as a poet, and in fact inside it. I have been working for something like 20 years on a long poetic work in many sections called Pushing Water, and it's been published now in two books. The second book came out just recently called At the Edge of the Sea, Pushing Water 2. Pushing water, where does it come from? Well, I had a kind of image that almost seemed like a dream image of a hand pushing through a flowing sheet of water, as one might flow over the edge of a rock or over the edge of a fountain. And that became to me a rich image of pushing through this wonderful material. And pushing water then became also about what we do every day. We push water because our bodies are 80-something% water. And of course, on this planet, water is always pushing against the land and then going back as well. So all of these senses of pushing water are referred to in the poem. I wouldn't say it's entirely about water. It's about life and living and many things. And there are also a lot of references in the work to other works of literature having to do with water, like the Maximus poems by the American poet Charles Olson, which were written literally, for the most part, at the edge of the sea in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where he lived, which was a site of whaling industry, fishing industry, and of course he was a master scholar on the work of Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. So everything seems to turn toward water, toward the sea. And I'm going to read a little bit from this work and talk a little bit about it. The work begins in the first book with the line, "This man strange turning." And you'll notice that's kind of even ungrammatical. It would be grammatical to say this strange man turning, or this man strangely turning. But I wanted that word strange to modify the subject, man, and the action, turning. I didn't realize until about 15 years after I wrote that the great epic poem by Homer, the Odyssey, begins with describing Odysseus as polytropos, which means many-sided, or one could say many turns. Sometimes that gets translated as a complicated man or a many-sided man. So saying something of that at the beginning of this poem, Pushing Water, this many-sided man, this strange turning man showing all these sides. So you get some sense of how a lot of complexity can be packed into a very few words. And I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of the second volume, and it begins with something of a memorial to a poet, Leslie Scalapino, who I was at her memorial and this was about 10 years ago, although this wasn't written quite that long ago. Voices in the cathedral song, Paris in the early evening, after flight. What leaves know about light, spring, wind hover song, word song, hover song, light song. In the river, the song. Light descends into the river. The song carries the wind, knowing the difficulty, the memorial black dress. The poet moves toward vanishment, into the body, the ghost space of light under the water song. To trust a word, to love the light, water through fingers. Another's hand leads through, into the dark, or just another room. So the second volume begins with a section that has river in it, has light descending into the river, has a water song in it and has that image of water moving through fingers. But it also is just an opening, like moving through the light, through the water, to just another room. I love the sense that poems can take all kinds of shapes and one can go lots of different places in them. And I hope this very long poem, but existing in about 80 separate sections, which aren't all so long, can take you, the reader, or any reader, into different such spaces. Okay, I'm going to read something now from the end of this, because I don't want to read the whole thing, because we'd be here all day and longer. It ends with 2 short sections, and one is called "For Love Is What Is." And it's almost like okay, we've had this long ride in the poem, maybe it's time to dismount. Do you want to? Yes, ride and dismount, while the queen with her flowered offerings dreams new conquests. And then the very last of this, Gorgon, or the story begins. And this was in part a response to a friend who was doing something based on this image of the Gorgon. So I wrote go or gone, not with the wind, but the water. Tide comes in. We enter the wave again, whole and not knowing. Possibly the most recurring little image in this long poem is that we are inside the wave of the world. So the wave is used as a metaphor for moving through life, through lives, through decades, and via memory through even distant pasts. And hopefully, while being inside the wave is also an image of being joined with others among this material, this world that unites us. There's even an image in this poem, this is in section 50 of it, that comes straight from a dream, which is of a hand, a giant hand that lifts up people, animal, rocks, all kinds of things, lifts them up, and in some mystical sense mixes all of their molecules, but returns them each to each. But after this mixing, everything knows everything else better. Everything has the experience of having been the other. And so there's this sense of union. I am an optimistic, no, I'm saying that wrong. I'm not an optimistic poet. Sometimes I have a terrible sense of whatever's coming, and certainly we live in times it's hard to be optimistic in. But I am hopeful, which is kind of slightly less than optimistic, but I hold out some sense that we can achieve something better as human beings than we have to this point or than we are right now. But not that will be easy in any sense, but that language that we share and these works of art and literature that we share can help us. So hopefully in Pushing Water, I give some sense of that. Thank you. This has been Page Open.